lead story on the race to rescue dock staff on Raoul Island after a major volcanic eruption. Helicopter
This morning, one of its craters erupted while a 30-year-old male dock staffer was taking water temperature readings from the crater lake.
2 women and 4 men were working on the remote island, and the eruption happened this morning.
On Friday, a rescue mission flew to Raoul Island to evacuate the remaining dock workers. Last night, they headed back to the island, leaving by ship in a bid to find their mate.
Mark Kearney was at the crater lake when it blew, but hopes of finding him are
A
slim.
team of volcanologists will make aerial checks to see if Raoul is still smouldering.
The 5 dock staff who lived on Raoul have returned to search for their missing colleague. The cloud and ash have died down, but they warn this sleeping giant is still potentially volatile.
We're checking for any weed seeds, insect pests. Because the island has been eradicated of a lot of things, it's a pristine island, we are checking everything to ensure that we don't have any incursions of rodent pests, insects or anything that the island doesn't have. Because then once they get on there, they're very difficult to get rid of. And that's why we're doing the check.
You've got your protection on?
Yes, ma'am.
You must be pretty used to it by now, though.
My first time out.
Oh no, sorry, this end's got the legs.
Early in 2006, Department of Conservation gave me a ring to say could I be on standby. There's an eruption up at Raoul Island, which is just about 1,000 kilometres north of New Zealand, and at that stage please keep it quiet, but they thought they'd lost one of their workers that were up there. While we were up there, I was sitting with the Department of Conservation manager, and I said to him, this trip we're doing for you, as you know, is completely unrehearsed and at a spur of the moment, and every good turn deserves another. What's the chances of coming back up here with a group of ham radio operators? Smiles all round, and that was the beginning of some very short negotiations, and here we are, sort of 6 months later. So out of every volcanic cloud, there's a silver lining, and fortunately for the ham radio boys, it was a very easy process to get the permit.
We actually departed from the port of Tauranga, which is a couple hours by car southeast of Auckland. The seas were a little lumpy the first day, not too bad, 4 or 5 foot swells on the port quarter.
The volcano blew, and they had to get people back and forth. They chose the Braveheart, operated and owned by Nigel Jolly. In return for the excellent work that Nigel had done in getting people on and off and providing service to the New Zealand government, smart fellow that he is, remembered his friends and hammed them. So coming on to this island was an opportunity we just could not pass up.
I'm just getting a little bit familiar with the radio here, some of the controls. Save us time later on being comfortable with how to operate these things.
Raoul Island, Braveheart, 71.
One of the conditions put upon us by the Department of Conservation, New Zealand government, people who are given access to this place have all of their gear checked.
Just give us a call when you're ready.
This place was overrun with cats and rats years ago. The New Zealand government has done a great job in getting rid of those. They want to try to get this area back to the way that it was. If you have mud on your boots, forget it. You have to clean them off, hose them off, lick them off, do whatever you need to do to get the stuff off so you can come onto the island.
The island is a nature reserve. It's also the biggest marine reserve in New Zealand. If you've got a bag or anything like that and you think that you might want to take anything out of it, just have a little look in just now, just in case a mouse or anything jumps out. Okay, we just want to make sure that no sage and no vermin come onto the island. We're going to walk up to the top, and we just have to mill around at the top just now until we start to bring the gear from the ship up on the top this way.
The gear was a little bit more complicated because it's heavy. It was in basically cargo bags or cargo nets. There's a hydraulically operated crane near the rock where we landed the personnel, and that crane was used to hoist the gear in the bags out of the dinghy, and the gear came up onto the rock and then was connected to what they call an aerial fox or foxway, which is basically similar to the cable cars in the mountains in Europe, but it's only for cargo. So the cargo was hoisted up the hill, and we met it up at the top and delivered it to its appropriate locations.
When we first arrived, we set about looking to see what we could do with our antenna system. We're really fortunate here that the New Zealand Department of Conservation have let us stay in the hostel that's attached to the conservation base here. And unlike most expeditions who bring beams and masts, in microlight we've always gone for verticals. Here we went back even further to the very basics of ham radio, and all our antennas are dipoles.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, dipoles. What's a dipole? It's a hunk of wire. And you cut the wire to the right frequency and you put it in the air, and then you hook it up and you talk on it. And that's essentially what we've done.
We're surrounded here by Norfolk pine trees. Average height is about 150 feet, and all the antennas are up in the trees at heights ranging from 60 to 120 feet. How we got up there is by climbing the trees, using ropes and climbing equipment. We were fortunate enough to have a climber as part of the crew, and he's climbed the trees for us and fixed pulleys and ropes, and we've hauled the antennas up into the high branches.
We're going to set this aerial up about 120 feet up this tree. In order to do that, we might need to aid a couple of sections. She's looking fairly run out. So I've got my power drill here, and maybe I'll bang a couple of bolts and I'll see what happens.
He's part mountain goat, I think, part New Zealand and part excellent cook. The guy's just amazing. But he scampers up trees like a squirrel gone crazy.
The antennas are working really well. As Mr. Scott used to say in Star Trek, you can't change the laws of physics, Jim, and it's certainly working out. Your basic dipole, really high, is just a killer antenna. And of course over at this QTH we're over the sea, we're sitting on a plateau 300 feet above the sea with just cliffs immediately below us and facing the Pacific Ocean, straight to JA and straight to stateside.
Well, the radio operations, as most of the microlight penguins expeditions go, we don't have a set schedule with a rigorous operator schedule. We pretty much go on the fly, and when one of us gets burned out, we grab somebody and have them take over for us. What normally happens is the sun comes up, and the three of us on the day shift get out of bed and take a shower, brush our teeth, and make the 5 or 10 minute walk over here to the shack. In the morning, let's see, it's about 1800 Zulu. 15 meters is just opening here to North America, so we usually have really excellent runs on 15.
November 1, Germany, Lima, Tokyo, N1 GLT, New Hampshire, you're 5'9".
Yeah, thanks, I got you that time. N1 GLT, you're 5'9".
Thanks.
Thank you, ZL9R up 5.
Whiskey Bravo 6, Queen Papa Golf.
Whiskey Bravo 6, Queen Papa Golf, 5'9".
Thank You're also 59 near San Francisco. Have a good weekend.
Hey, thanks. Nice signal. We're having a great trip. 73 from ZL9R 5.
We originally set up 6 radio stations. Because of our limited personnel, we only have 8 expeditionaries. So there's essentially 3 of us plus W7EW, our moon bounce guy, who shares moon bounce with HF. Essentially, let's say 3.5 people in the day shift and 4 people on the night shift. So it was really tough to man 6 complete radio stations.
November Whiskey 7 Mike Tango 59.
59 Montana, thank you.
Thank you, sir. ZL8R. Okay, there's a 2 Bravo Yankee.
So we took one of the radio stations down, used it for spares. We ended up actually using the laptop and the radio for spares. I think we may have just got a piece of foreign material in the headphone jack of the radio, nothing major.
Radio Delta X-ray.
Whiskey 2 Radio Delta X-ray. Good morning, 59.
Thank you. You're also 5 and 9. Thank you.
73 ZL8R.
Whiskey 5.
Could I have the Whiskey 5?
Whiskey 5, Bravo X-ray.
Whiskey 5 Bravo X-ray X-ray. You're 59.
Thank you. Also 5-9 in Houston.
Thanks for Houston. Who's the Japan station?
Japan, America 7, London, Mexico, Zulu.
Japan Alpha 7, London, Mexico, Zulu 59, Dozo.
Thank you, 5 and 92.
Propagation appears to be a bit strange from this location. It's flip-flopping back and forth between stateside and JA on most of the bands.
Thank you very much. You're 5-9. Thank you for a new one.
You're welcome for a new one. Glad to do it. 73 ZL8R.
Alpha 2 Whiskey November.
There you are, Alpha 2 Whiskey November 59.
Thank you, 5-9.
There isn't really a sort of JA opening and a stateside opening. You get 10, 15, 20 minutes, maybe a half hour of very strong stateside. Then JA comes in for around the same length of time, and then it can be back to stateside again. And in the middle of all that, there's some unusual signals coming through. Certainly the guys from the Central Pacific, some nice DX stations, Tango 32, Victor 7. But also Europeans from time to time appearing, you know, out of the JAs and the stateside. Very, very strange.
November.
Ending November.
Japan Echo 2, Lima United November.
Juliet Echo 2, Lima Uniform November 59.
Good morning. You are also 59. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, 73 ZL8R. I think I heard a November 2.
Kermadec is quite a special group of islands. It's a chain of islands which stretches 130 kilometres from L'Espérance Rock in the south to Raoul Island in the north. There are a team of 5 of us currently on the island. Our main job is to improve the ecosystem in general. It's a very special place. It's near natural just now. There are some introduced plants. The area was farmed at one time. But the Department of Conservation are fully committed to bring the island to a pristine condition if possible.
The main reason that we're working here is because we think that biodiversity is really important. This island's really unique, it's really isolated, and it's home to some really unique species of plants as well as seabirds.
What the main task just now involves is weed control. 4 years ago, they eradicated all the animal pests on the island, rats and cats. So now we're trying to get on top of the plant pests and try and get as many of the weeds as possible.
In addition to doing the weed work on the island, we also contracted out to the New Zealand Met Service. Every day of the week we do meteorological duties, and that basically involves launching a weather balloon, taking weather observations and sending that data back to New Zealand to the service. Primarily what we're doing is filling a gap in the South Pacific. For New Zealand, we're keeping an eye on the tropical cyclones as they come down towards New Zealand in the summer months. All the buildings were built by the Met Service around the 1930s. Primarily it was a radio station to guide the flying boats in from Hawaii. But once the radio station was set up, the Met Service took over that and built the facilities that we still have today, including this wool shed that you guys are set up in. It was part of the farm that was set up.
The island itself is a very beautiful place, very special place to visit.
It's really fortunate that this is a wildlife preserve and access is highly restricted. Even if it weren't, it's so hard to get here that the little island is basically safe from development.
It's a tribute to the New Zealand government that they've managed to keep this place so pristine, and it's good to see what New Zealand is doing here.
At sunset, of course, basically all the bands come alive on the lower end. So we switched to 80, 40, 30, 20, even 17. We've run into the darkness hours to Europe, which was really incredible.
We're seeing an evolution in the microlight penguin de-expedition experience. In the past, we've used verticals and had great success with those. We've taken it one step even further. On one hand, you have the folks sitting at home with their very expensive towers, their very expensive antennas, huge amount of gain, and all these wonderful things that amateur radio has now based upon technology. But the one thing lacking is operating experience, operating excellence. People are relying on packet. And so we want to make a strike for let's go retro a little bit and use something that's very effective. People put too much emphasis on the gear and not on the operating and not on just the basic nature of radio. If you keep it simple, it's sure a lot of fun.
I'm a huge believer in simplicity and simple dipoles. Having been a poor guy as a kid, I couldn't afford any decent antennas, so I got used to using dipoles and really learned to love them. We decided, since we had a fantastic location above the sea here, that there's no need to bring fancy Yagi antennas and things like that. We were hoping to avoid a lot of the RFI issues which plague some expeditions which use verticals, and that's been true for the most part. We've had some other issues RFI-wise, and we think we solved them. Some of the dipoles went right on the bluff, which gives them an effective height of about 100 meters above saltwater, which I don't see how it could be any better. The dipoles, of course, are simple. They perform beautifully, and they'll come down in about 30 seconds when we need to take them back down.
The island was originally post for whalers, providing fresh food and stuff like that. And then they sort of came and went, and there were other settlers that tried to set up farms, and there's the odd eruption, and it was a real struggle to grow food, and there were rats and things like that. But the family that really sort of made a mark on this place was the Bell family. And Mr. Bell sailed out here with his wife and 2 daughters. They were dropped off, and they were meant to be here for 6 months, and then another boat was going to come back and see how they were doing. They were dropped off with supplies that had weevils in, and they were just no good. They weren't edible, and the boat never came back. They were just left here. Back then there were heaps of Kermadec petrels all along the beaches, so they had food, they fished, they caught turtles. But they struggled, and they stayed here for about 30 years. They had sheep and some cattle in the end, and kumara.
In the process, they left us this fantastic gift of these wonderful Norfolk Island pines, probably 100 years old and 120 feet, 40 meters high, which provided the perfect basis for our antenna system.
Zulu Lima 8 radio, listening Europe 200 to 210.
HL3I 5 and 9.
Papa Yankee 3 Oscar Lima. Brazil is not in Europe. Please stand by. Europe only, 200 to 210. Zulu Lima 8 radio. We're quite a small team, only 8 operators, so that's put a huge workload on the team. I think every member of the team is sitting in front of the radio about 12 to 15 hours a day or night. We've split up into 2 teams. The daytime guys come on around 6 a.m. and usually they don't get to bed till 11 at night and are operating the radio more or less continuously for that time. The night guys, there's a bit of a changeover. They come in around the late afternoon or the early evening, and they'll take some turns on the radio, and then they work through the night, working 160, 80 and 40 or whatever bands are open. 20 metres isn't as productive as you'd imagine, but more than compensated for by the amount of activity we're finding on the higher bands. I think what's really been interesting about this expedition has been the nature of the pile-ups. They have been really, really well behaved, contrary to all the sort of hype that you hear about pile-ups and chaos, etc. Stateside, Japan, even Europe has been working out pretty well.
It's been going for hour after hour after hour. It's pretty easy to do 120 hours. The pile-ups are still pretty thick, so we're not able to be terribly efficient. Very nice opening into Europe. A lot of weak guys got through around the edges of the pile-up. We'll have a good night at it. We've got about 6 good hours of darkness and band openings, and we'll just continue to crank out the QSOs.
Well, this expedition's been fantastic for us. Unfortunately, it occurred due to a tragedy on the island. The volcano underwent a geothermal eruption, which means it spewed a little bit of steam and ash and rocks, no magma. Unfortunately, Mark, one of the DOC or dock team here, was at the fumarole making measurements when the volcano erupted, and it basically killed him instantly, as far as we're aware.
RAL has been shaped by a series of eruptions, so the way we see it now is quite recent. And it's taken 4 or 5 eruptions just to shape that crater that we have at present.
It's a volcanic island, and it sits very close to the Kermadec Trench, which is one of the deepest parts of the Pacific Ocean. The Kermadec Trench is the area where the Australasian and the Pacific Plate meet. It's one of the subduction zones. The two plates are moving against each other, and that creates quite a lot of tectonic activity.
The Kermadec Trench suffers lots of movement, so we have quite a lot of earthquakes. So the eruption earlier this year was caused by movement on the Kermadec Trench, upsetting a few systems here that were blocked.
There was no warning. We had a series of earthquakes, what we call a swarm of earthquakes, which we've had many times in the past. Probably since the 1964 eruption, there have been 3 or 4 earthquake swarms. And what Mark was in there for is we were looking for changes in the lake level, looking for signs that would indicate that something wasn't right.
DOC in the mainland evacuated the team immediately and called Nigel Jolly, owner of Braveheart, our DX boat, and asked him if he could go and search for Mark's body, and Nigel basically dropped everything, fired up the engine and left, and brought his crew up here and the team leader, Jim, and they went into the crater attempting to locate Mark. His body was never found. He's part of the island.
When we got there was a large volcanic sort of cloud above the island. Rowell Island is made up of a big crater with a couple of small lakes in it, and one of the lakes was where the eruptions took place from.
It is obviously an active volcano, as we found out on March 17th, but then the signs were there for us to know about. The island topography itself, even when you have a look at some of the banding on the cliffs, are just a result of successive ash falls. Also, another part of the work out here is that one of us is devoted to doing volcanology duties, which was where Mark was during the day that the island erupted, and why we had the volcanologist out here this time to try and find out exactly why we had no warning on the day that it did erupt.
Yeah, we just got through calling CQ on a 1-minute sequence, and what's happened here, the moon is up around just under 15 degrees, so it's still really high in the air. And I see a very faint trace on the spectran, and so I decode it, and lo and behold, here's Sugar Mike 7 Fox Japan Echo. So what I've done is I put him in the next sequence. I'm going to send our call, ZL9R, and then our grid square, and then the signal report, 000. So what I'm waiting for is for him to see that and then to respond with the ROs. So the game is afoot. We're getting close. On Kerguelen, we had skeds on 6-meter EME, and they were set out months in advance, and away you'd go. And you'd run with whoever it was until you completed, and then they had the queue, so that's okay. This time it's all different. We needed to go back to the basics. When somebody calls CQ, there should be a pileup. There should be people calling back. Can you pick the strongest one? And that's what we're doing now off the moon. EME stands for Earth, Moon, Earth. And we have a beam that we put up a whopping 22 feet, feeding it with about 750 watts. And every moon set and every moon rise we're on. Now what we're doing is I just call CQ, and then I look for the answers. I say look because once you know about this type of thing, you don't hear it. It's well below the noise level. We're talking 20 to 30 dB below the noise level. So you look for the answers. When you see the answers, you decode them. So he acknowledged that. I sent him my RRRs all over the place, and it'd be nice to get a 73. So that little tiny blip way up here, those two little tiny blips like that, we were able to decode down here. So I've got my 73s, that's a good contact. That's a great cue, absolutely a great cue. So far we've worked four stations, all very loud, great operators, and they're in the log. I've printed or been able to see calls on several others, but so far we haven't completed with them. So we're running both Moonset and Moonrise. I gave a call to W7GJ, said, hey, tell the guys to start calling. Initially I said, listen, don't call unless you hear us, but I need the feedback. I need to know that my beam is pointed directly at the moon. And so everybody's calling, and we expect to work a lot more folks, Earth, Moon, Earth, on 6 meters.
Spit it out.
There it is,
No, that's not my foot switch. I have to have my foot switch.
I'm using your foot switch because you're using my foot switch.
What are we going to do? We can't get the right foot switch plugged into anywhere.
You give me mine and I'll give you yours.
Yeah, I'll give you yours, all right, buddy.
Okay. That's good. The other side as well. Strong enough?
That's good. We had some RFI problems on 160 meters. Running high power would get into the other radios. So we decided we'd try this. It's a voltage divider. Well, we've got an RF choke with coil coax, and then that's coming from the antenna, and then it goes to a ground rod, and then to another RF choke with more coiled coax going to the shack. And hopefully we can prevent the excess RF or unwanted RF from getting into our radios and the computers, and which all causes these keying problems we're having with the 160 meter antenna. Our 160 meter antenna is a full-size dipole. It's up at about 125 feet or so, and one leg goes out toward the northeast, and the other one to the southwest, and gets out pretty good.
ICOM was gracious to loan us 6 brand new IC7000s. The guys took a little bit of time to get used to the menu system, as I did, but once we got used to it, we were able to drive those radios like we'd owned them for years. Single sideband, it has everything we need, variable audio transmit bandwidth, which is nice. We just set it on wide and go for it. CW, I was really amazed. The break-in keying is smooth, and we can vary the rise time of the envelope, which actually turned out to be very advantageous. One morning I was interfering with one of the other stations, and I said, well, let me try to increase the rise time of the CW envelope, and I set it to 8 milliseconds, and the interference went away.
We're living down in the hostel, which is simple accommodation, but it has showers and all the facilities we need to keep ourselves comfortable.
Now around the hostel building, there's the main building itself, and there we have the annex, which is where everyone's staying. That sleeps 12 people. Around the hostel we have a small hospital building, dry goods store, our chiller and freezer, and of course our brewery. So the building the hams are operating out of, it's called the Woolshed, and that was built in 1936 to undertake, well, shearing of the island's herd of sheep.
It's an old building, but it's dry and it's got a couple of rooms and it's comfortable and a good kitchen area, so we're able to operate quite comfortably.
Constructing a bit of a shelter here for my Teletubbies.
Rotten, our chief squirrel, you might say, who runs up trees and cooks. Every day we have excellent meals. We had a hangi where you dig a big hole in the ground and fill it up with rocks and wood, and you get the rocks hot, and then you bury the food in leaves, and then you cover it with dirt. They let it cook for 6 hours. Had that last night. So our routine's settling down. We're eating great. We're sleeping well. Other forms of recreation, go swimming or surfing if you want, hikes to other parts of the island.
Where's the snow? Where's the snow? There's no snow around here.
It's hard to do just radio, but we're all radio nuts, and that's primarily what we're doing.
We're not actually here for ham radio. We don't have QST. We don't have 73 magazine. We don't have Radcom. We have more pork. Or Time magazines from 1980, Pig Hunter, for all your hunting needs. This is about DXing actually.
We've heard quite a bit about radio hams in the past. We eagerly awaited their arrival because we thought these guys are really going to be interesting people. 8 people, 8 international people from all walks of life. Fantastic. They've activated the island for us.
We're at the bottom of the sunspot cycle. I believe James looked up the solar flux today and it was 71. And it really doesn't get much lower than that. However, we've actually had openings on 10 meters into North America and Japan. It's been absolutely fantastic to run the 10-meter pileups, just a blast. We put the 10-meter dipole up right at the edge of the bluff, and it seems to play extremely well. So we've had just a heck of a lot of fun on 10 meters. Of course, 12's been open. We were actually running North America one day, and we started to hear EA8s and CT3s calling, and that's out near our antipode. Our antipode is actually in the middle of Algeria, 7 X-ray. So right in the middle of this wonderful run to the States, we start to hear our antipodal friends calling in, and it was just absolutely phenomenal. I just couldn't believe we were hearing stations all the way from one end of the bright side of the earth to the other. Victor Echo 3 Echo Juliet, you're 5'9".
Yeah, QSL, very good, Mike. Listen, on behalf of all the DXers that are not on Raoul Island at this time, thank you. You guys have done a great job.
Well, John, we should have had you here. We could have done a lot better job. We could have had a lot more fun, okay?
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, well, we know about that. We miss you. You're here in spirit, and Wes is here in almost person.
I talked to Wes on the phone at great length last night, and he's really sorry he couldn't make it either. So you guys are packing her in, are you?
Yep, James told me to cut her off, so you're the last one.
Hey, Mike, thanks, and thanks to the guys. Say hi to the crew of the ship for me too, will you please?
Yeah, they're doing great. All the guys say hi, and even Nigel.
Excellent.
Okay, well, we're going to pull the plug, everybody. Thanks a lot for all the fun. Thanks a lot for the great pileups and your cooperation. You've been fantastic, and we might be back out here at the Solar Max. You never know. 73, everybody. This is ZL9R, and we're pulling the plug. Bye-bye.
We're tearing down the antennas right now. I'm getting ready to go back to the Braveheart for a lovely 2-day sailing. This was the 40-meter antenna.
We are dismantling the EME antenna. This big monster antenna fits into a little 4-foot carrying case. This is the case that big antenna goes into. All these parts like a jigsaw puzzle.
There's still a lot to do before we shove off.
This trip was great. Something not everybody can do or even wants to do. It's great just to be part of the team, come together, assemble all of this equipment that we need, be on the air as much as you can for about 10 days' time.
Well, I'm stoked to see you guys out here. Even though you've put up with going through quarantine 3 times, good on you. The whole world can't be a city. This is why we're protecting it. You're seeing it firsthand.
This is a good thing. There's nothing like it.
And you look around here and it really looks like heaven on earth.
Being out here is an absolute privilege because you guys get to see parts of the world. They're full on special, and once you're out here and live here and work here and get a glimpse of what this has to offer, it makes the reason that we have people like the Department of Conservation, people willing to put their money where their mouth is in the terms of conservation, that mean that places like this will still exist when we're dust.
It's been great. We've missed out on so much this year because of the eruption. It's really great to have fresh faces around, people who are interested in what we do, people that we can share our experiences with.
How long did it take to tear down? An hour?
Hour and a half, maybe.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
It's the only way to go.
Absolutely.
All the radios, all the little tuners, all the power supplies, all the laptops, right here in these 3 Pelicans. So there it is. I mean, that's 40,000 QSOs sitting in the box.
We are the safety officers on the island for today. We are serious guys, so we are not allowed to talk to strangers.
We're going to help load this stuff, send it on down so it can get on the Zodiac. Right now at the bottom, there's a bag full of equipment. It's going to get unloaded. We send the cable back up again. We'll load these bags, hook them on one at a time, bring them down. So we've got the heavy equipment first. The generators are going, the fuel, leftover fuel's going, and then some of the heavier equipment that we brought with us, followed up by the lighter, more fragile things. So when they get loaded on the boat, those things that are light and fragile will be on the top. It'll take us a couple hours probably, one at a time and everything, gradually to the boat.
The Braveheart crew, I can't say enough good things about these people. I've never seen a bunch of harder working people in my life. They make commitments, follow through. It's an absolute joy to come on a trip with them because you know that we're going to be taken care of 200% all the way.
Oh, you never want to go home after one of these. You got to convince yourself, you know, to go back to the reality of it.
How was that?
Excellent. Let's go back and do it again.
Braveheart seems to feature quite regularly with the ham radio operators. It's not the only thing we do. We work for the British government, New Zealand government, and many film companies. But to tell the truth, the ham radio group that we have an affiliation with is our most enjoyable trips.
Be a big boy, don't cry.
No. Looking forward to doing work with the ham radio Teletubbies, as we call them, is the highlight of our year. And when a year goes by and we haven't got a Teletubby trip, it's a little bit of a disappointment. The boys who went away have all come back on board just now smiling. I shook each one of them by the hand and said, "How was it?" And they just looked at me with a sort of a sly smile and said, "One of the best." Teletubby tables. They're round, so no one can sit on a corner.
See that red light?
Lima 8 radio, Zulu Lima 8 radio.
There's a bag full of equipment. It's going to get unloaded. Safety first.
Can't do this anymore. I'm blinded by this DXing fun.
Get in front of your radio, turn that big knob in the center, and just work it.
Juliet Lima 1, Whiskey Papa Quebec, you're 5'9".
You've seen the stool shed for the wool shed. You need a hammer. There's cockroaches as big as turtles.
Back to Roswell, you stupid bird.
Alpha Papa, boing!
Get your butt off my camera.
Excellent, excellent.